Between 1827 and 1829, over 400 Irish immigrant laborers came to Windsor and Suffield to construct a canal bypassing the Connecticut River's treacherous Enfield Rapids. They begin right here. The ambitious project came at the beginning of America's canal building era, which began in 1825 and ended about 1845 when railroads made most canals obsolete. The Erie Canal from Albany to Buffalo is the mother of all American canals. The enthusiasm generated by the completion of the Erie resulted in a canal building boom around the nation. The canal around the Enfield Rapids, which has come to be known as the Windsor Locks Canal, is unique in that it was one of the first canals designed to facilitate transportation added by steam towboats. The canal was designed with a dual purpose. In addition to improving navigation of the river, the canal was intended to serve as the backbone of a water-powered industrial center. There was a 30-foot drop between the water level at the south end of the canal and the water level in the river. While a system of 3 locks was used to raise boats into and out of the canal, the drop in water level provided potential energy to manufacturing establishments that sprung up between the canal and the river. In fact, you are now standing on the site of the Pearce and Brooks Paper Company, where Dudley Pearce from Galway became the first of many Irish papermakers to operate mills along the canal, taking advantage of the plentiful water power the canal provided. The mill was for a time the largest in the country and provided all of the newsprint for the New York Herald newspaper. Other prominent Irish families who applied their skills to the emerging American papermaking industry here in Windsor Locks were the Coogans, Burns, Outersons, Englishes, Carrolls, and Gogartys. The colorful navigators and ambitious industrialists benefiting from the canal created a vibrant local economy. The shipping and industrial center became known as Windsor Locks and was finally incorporated with that name in 1854. While it is unquestioned that the town of Windsor Locks owes its existence to the canal, it is also clear that the canal owes its existence to the unnatural confluence of 2 distinct ethnic and economic populations. On the one hand are the Anglo-American, Protestant, and prosperous Hartford businessmen who conceived, promoted, and financed the canal. On the other are the Irish, Catholic, and dirt-poor immigrants whose labor brought the concept into reality. The story of the former is well documented. The story of the latter is mostly unknown. Nellie Grace Abbey, a Connecticut River ship captain's daughter, recollected on the arrival of the more than 400-strong Irish labor force to the area in her 1897 article, Traffic on the Connecticut River Half a Century Ago. She wrote, "They came on rafts and in scow boats, often with their entire worldly goods knotted up in a red bandana, and many with not even that. They camped in the woods and cooked their food in the huge cauldrons used for melting tar. Indeed, the appearance of an Irishman was so rare in these parts that Windsor Locks historian Jabez Haskell Hayden, who was a teenager when they arrived, commented, 'I had seen but one before.'" The first order of business in most canal companies was to purchase or lease a site to erect a workers' camp. These shanty towns were located as close to the construction site as possible. The first purchase of the Connecticut River Company was a large tract from the Griswold family, who operated a shad fishery on the river just north of where we are now. Just beyond that fence was the beginning of the Griswold fish place. That's what they called the shad fishery. It was bounded north by the remaining land of the Griswolds, west by what is now Center Street in Windsor Locks, south by about Church Street in Windsor Locks, and east by the river. That places the labor camp directly west of where we are now standing. This is where they lived. This was the shanty town. Construction commenced in May of 1827, and in August of 1827, a laborer was seriously injured working on the canal, and his fellow workers sought out a priest to administer the last rites of the church to the dying man. Because these Irish Catholics had been brought from New York and were probably quite unaware that they were technically within the jurisdiction of the Archdiocese of Boston, a man was sent to New York and returned with Reverend John Power, native of County Cork, Ireland, and Vicar General of the Diocese of New York. Father Power was also the pastor of St. Peter's Church in Lower Manhattan, which you may recall, it's been in the news a lot in the most recent decades because it's that church is directly across from the site of the World Trade Center, that wrought iron fence in front. That's where he was, and he came here for that purpose. The trip was accomplished by boat because at that time there was already regular steamship service from New York to Hartford. As reported in the history of St. Peter's Parish, after performing his work of mercy, Reverend Power said Mass in an open field. Later historical accounts identify the site as an open field beside the river, under a canopy of trees, and near the head of the shad fishery. Such description places the site of the first Roman Catholic Mass north of Hartford in the vicinity of the workers' camp, most likely under the stand of pine trees that stood along the southern border of the Griswold land. The large structure, the brick structure at the back, which we locally call the castle, that was built after this time. The Griswold house is just beyond that. But on top of that hill, there was a line of pine trees that stood there for years, and even after the Windsor Locks Chapter, the Hibernians had their annual picnics right there. At the urging of the canal workers, Father Power returned to Windsor Locks in October 1827, where he preached, said Mass, and conducted a short mission. The Catholics in the area went a year without spiritual guidance until Reverend R.D. Woodley was ordained in Boston and immediately assigned to the entire states of Rhode Island and Connecticut as his territory. Quite the parish, huh, Senior? Reverend Woodley, who traveled on horseback, made at least 3 visits to Hartford and to the canal during September 1828, May 1829, and July 1829. Several years ago, I visited the archives of the Archdiocese of Boston, where I discovered a leather-bound, handwritten ledger book that turned out to be the baptism records of Reverend R.D. Woodley from that area. I learned that on his 3 visits to visit the Irish laborers on the canal in 1828 and 1829, he baptized 15 infant children of canal workers. This confirmed that at least some of the workers came with families, and that jived with historical accounts of life in other canal laborer camps where women were hired to cook and clean communally. But think about the difficulty of babies being born into such harsh conditions. The infant mortality rate for the general population of Connecticut was about 50% in the 1820s. The death rate for the children of immigrant laborers living in rudimentary shanties must have been even higher. It is almost a certainty that some of these canal area babies did not survive their time in Windsor Locks. Statistical compilations from other canal construction projects of the era paint a grim picture of canal life. Worker deaths from disease and occupational hazards were commonplace. Laborers were paid a premium for blasting away rock, although they did not need to prove any expertise in that skill, which led to many tragic deaths and maimings. Cholera was a particularly deadly menace. When a worker contracted the cholerae, as they referred to it, he was carried on a plank by his co-workers into the deep woods and left to suffer alone out of fear that he might spread the disease to others. There are stories from other canal camps of laborers lying in their shanties on dark and quiet nights, helplessly listening to the mournful cries of their afflicted comrades. In one case, during the construction of the Wabash and Erie Canal through Huntington County, Indiana, it is estimated that 1 worker died for every 6 feet of canal completed. Although such reports may be exaggerations, even if workers died at 1/100th of that rate, the 5.5-mile Windsor Locks Canal would have experienced nearly 50 worker deaths. So this begs the question, where are the remains of these poor souls buried? A recent discovery sheds some light on this mystery. After the canal was completed in 1829, its operators enjoyed 15 years of competition-free prosperity. The emergence of railroads, with their speed and efficiency, quickly eclipsed the canal's utility. In 1844, the operator of the canal, the Connecticut River Company, conveyed the land for the railroad along the west side of the canal to the Hartford and New Haven Railroad Company. The deed of conveyance also conveys several parcels of land. One of these parcels was a small 70-foot by 70-foot piece on the north side of Carlton's Basin. This piece is described as stretching 35 feet to each side measuring from the center line of the railroad bed. Carlton's Basin, also referred to as the Lower Basin, was a body of water fed by the brook running behind Paisy Park. The Windsor Locks Commons now sits where the basin was located. So the blue plaza, Windsor Locks Commons there, that's built on filled-in land that was Carlton's Basin. The legal description of that small, oh, by the way, it seems that a leprechaun or somebody came out early this morning and placed four, not sure if you can see them, 4 shamrocks at the 4 corners of the parcel. If you look over after, you'll see they're out there marking off the 4 corners. Amtrak doesn't look kindly on trespassing, so we will attribute it to a leprechaun and leave it at that. But this conveyance of this restrictive covenant in the deed, it reads, "No excavation shall be made on said strip of land deeper than is necessary to properly grading and draining said road or way. No such restriction exists with regard to any of the other parcels conveyed. It can reasonably be concluded that this small parcel on the banks of the canal is the burial site of dozens of canal laborers and their family members. This conclusion is supported by the fact that the remains of workers have been discovered along the banks of several canals constructed during the same era. It makes sense that both the labor camp and the burial site would be on land of the Connecticut River Company in close proximity to each other." When the canal was completed in 1829, most of the laborers moved on to other canal projects, although we know that a few, such as John and Lawrence McMahon and John Gwinnane, remained to work on the completed canal and raise families here. May we always remember that these laborers left all that they knew behind them, to work from dawn till dusk in damp and dangerous conditions, and many lost their lives in constructing this remarkable public work that gave birth to our town. We should not rest until they receive their just recognition and honor. Thank you.